There are no police here, no courtroom, no judge, no written code scratched onto stone. There is no jail to lock someone inside, no state with the power to reach down and remove a person from the world. There is only the group, 20, maybe 30 people, sitting around a fire, somewhere on a grass plain, somewhere between 50,000 and 200,000 years ago. And someone in that group has done something wrong. What happens next is one of the most fascinating and most unsettling chapters in the entire story of our species. Because they had answers, they had systems, they had punishments that were, in many ways, more sophisticated than what came long after. And the evidence for all of this, dug from the dirt, extracted from the bones, carried forward by the last remaining societies that still live this way, has fundamentally changed how scientists understand what it means to be human. Let's start with a simple but important question. What is a rule, really, before there is a law? A law is written. A law has a name behind it, a king, a god, a state. A law implies an institution capable of enforcing it, but rules, the raw human impulse to say this is acceptable and this is not, those predate all of that by an enormous margin. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm of the University of Southern California has spent decades studying the social behavior of hunter-gatherer groups, both modern and prehistoric. His conclusion, drawn from studying societies across all 6 inhabited regions of the Earth, North and South America, Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Arctic, is that the basic moral categories appear to be consistent. These prehistoric hunter-gatherers morally condemned a range of behaviors, including serial murder, sorcery that led to undue domination, theft, and cheating, failure to cooperate, and the breaking of major taboos, including incest. The specific rules varied by group, but the categories like make harm to the group, exploitation, betrayal, refusal to share, those appear everywhere. And this makes a certain brutal kind of sense. In a band of 25 people moving across a landscape where food is uncertain, where predators exist, where a bad winter can kill everyone, the social contract is not abstract. Defection is not a philosophical problem. Defection kills people. Now here's where things get interesting, and where the evidence surprises almost everyone who first encounters it. We tend to assume that prehistoric life was dominated by whoever was strongest. The biggest man led. The most aggressive person took what they wanted. Life was, as the philosopher Thomas Hobbes famously put it, nasty, brutish, and short, and the powerful did as they pleased. The anthropological record says something almost exactly opposite. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm developed what he calls the reverse dominance theory of hunter-gatherer egalitarianism. His theory is that hunter-gatherers everywhere learned to turn the dominance hierarchy upside down, so the band as a whole would act against any individual who acted in a domineering or selfish way. Think about what this means. In our closest primate relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, the dominant individual commands resources, controls reproduction, and enforces compliance through fear and physical strength. Prehistorically, something changed. The group learned to act together. And when the group acts together, even the most physically powerful individual cannot win. The Cambridge anthropologist James Woodburn posited that with respect to political hierarchy, human evolution followed a U-shaped curve. Our pre-human ancestors were despotic, led by alpha types similar to our present great ape cousins. Then, for the vast majority of human existence, something different emerged. And only much later, with agriculture, surplus, and the ability to store and protect wealth, did formal hierarchy return. The middle of that curve, the long flat valley of it, is where almost all of human evolution happened. For hundreds of thousands of years, the bully lost. So how did they do it? How did a group of 30 people without a police force or a legal code enforce a standard of behavior? The answer comes in layers. And the first layer, the one deployed most often, the one that forms the foundation of the entire system, is one you use today, probably without thinking about it: gossip. People in a small community gossip all the time and maintain elaborate mental dossiers on one another's behavior. Any infraction of social norms may be remembered for years. Guarding one's reputation would have become critical. In a band of 25 people, there is no anonymity. Everyone has seen everyone else under conditions of stress, hunger, fear, and temptation. Everyone knows who shared their meat last winter. Everyone knows who slipped away during the hunt. Everyone knows who lied about the kill. And everyone talks about it. Around the fire, in quiet pairs, across families, between bands when they gather seasonally. Reputation is not a social nicety in this environment. Reputation is survival infrastructure. A man with a bad reputation will not receive food when he is injured. A woman known to be untrustworthy will find no one willing to partner with her in the gathering work. Reputation is currency, and gossip is the market that sets the price. Gossipers and hunter-gatherer societies serve two purposes: reputation dissemination and selfishness deterrence. Sharing information about others' reputations helped keep individuals accountable and cooperative. Gossip served the community by keeping others in line. Boehm described gossip specifically as a leveling mechanism, a way for the group to neutralize the dominance tendencies of any single individual before that dominance could take hold. It is, in this reading, the original law enforcement. It costs nothing, it requires no institution, it scales naturally with group size, and at work, with a quiet, persistent, socially devastating efficiency. But what happens when whispered judgment isn't enough? What happens when the person hears the murmurs and doesn't change? This is where the second layer of prehistoric justice comes in, and it is, in its own way, fascinating: ridicule. Not casual mockery, deliberate, ritualized public humiliation. Among several African hunter-gatherer groups, overtly self-aggrandizing or domineering behavior is met with social sanctions which include deliberate oppositional behavior or ridicule until humility is demonstrated. If a hunter was not appropriately modest about the size of their kill, individuals would mock both the meat and the hunter. This is not cruelty for its own sake. This is a precision instrument. It communicates in terms no one can misunderstand exactly where the community stands on what you have done. The Kungsan people of the Kalahari Desert have a practice that anthropologist Richard Lee documented in detail. When a hunter returns from a successful kill, a large animal, something worth celebrating, the band does not celebrate it. In their culture, when a hunter returns to the group, his kill is ritually insulted until it is distributed to the entire group. This is how they cool his heart and make him gentle. The elders told Lee directly, when a young man kills much meat, he begins to think of himself as a chief, as someone above the rest. They cannot accept this. The pride itself, not the killing, is the transgression. And so the meat is called worthless, the hunter is teased mercilessly. And by the time the food is distributed, which it always is, the message has been delivered, received, and absorbed. The hierarchy has been leveled. The community is spoken without a single formal proceeding. This same impulse appears across cultures with no contact with each other. Among the Mbuti of Central Africa, it appears. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, it appears. Among Arctic peoples thousands of kilometers away, it appears. The form varies, the function does not. Now we arrive at one of the most remarkable examples of prehistoric justice anywhere in the ethnographic record. One that sounds, at first, almost too strange to be real. Among the Inuit peoples of the Arctic, groups living in conditions of extreme cold, extreme isolation, and extreme dependence on cooperation, conflict between individuals was not always resolved by force or formal judgment. If a conflict arose between two men, they could try to settle it with a song duel. They used two weapons, wit and satire. Each composed a song about his opponent, which would be performed at a community feast. The composer of the cleverest song, the one the audience enjoyed the most, won the duel. The whole camp gathered. The songs were improvised, personal, often devastating. The audience watched, the audience laughed, and the audience decided. The song duel was resorted to in exceptional circumstances when conflict was difficult to resolve, and the two individuals exchanged contemptuous songs while an amused audience watched. There was no appeal, no second hearing. The community's collective reaction was the verdict, and the verdict was final. What is extraordinary about this practice is how much it accomplishes at once. It turns a potential act of violence into a performance. It gives the community a voice, not just the two individuals in conflict, but everyone. Through their laughter and their silence, it produces a resolution without bloodshed. And it does all of this while maintaining the fundamental principle that runs through virtually every prehistoric justice system we've ever studied. The group holds ultimate authority over the individual. Not a king, not a court, the group. But ridicule has limits, songs have limits, gossip has limits. There are individuals who do not respond to social pressure, who continue to dominate, to steal, to threaten, to harm, regardless of how the community reacts. And this is where prehistoric justice moved into territory that is both darker and more consequential than anything we have looked at so far. The first escalation was ostracism. In a small mobile band on a landscape where food requires cooperation to find, ostracism is not a symbolic punishment. In hunter-gatherer societies, the consequence of ostracism can be devastating because it not only comes with the psychological distress of social isolation, but also threatens subsistence. To be excluded from the group means no one hunts alongside you, no one shares their fire, no one helps when you are injured. No one warns you when danger is close. Ostracism in the prehistoric context is not exile from a community. It is a slow death sentence delivered without a single act of violence by a community that simply stops acknowledging your existence. Persistent deviation from expected levels of cooperativeness or humility leads to more severe social sanctions such as shunning, ostracism, or rarely exile. But even ostracism, as devastating as it was not always enough. Some individuals remained, some continued to threaten, some returned from banishment and resumed their behavior. And for those individuals, the evidence across every region of the world that anthropologists have studied points to the same final answer. Here is something that most people have never considered. Before there were prisons, which, as Bohm notes, did not exist as an institution until states emerged roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. If a group could not cope with and could not escape from a dangerous individual, there was only one option. Before 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, it is very doubtful that even the notion of incarceration existed, for that was when taxation-based states and civilizations came along to provide the necessary infrastructure. Before that, if a socially endangered group could neither cope with nor escape from a dangerous or oppressive group member, physical elimination was the only way to handle the situation, capital punishment, carried out not by an executioner, not by a king, but by the community itself, or by someone the community delegated. And here is where Bohm's research becomes particularly striking. Hunter-gatherers practice capital punishment in all 6 of the world regions they inhabit: North and South America, Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Arctic. So, minimally, this practice qualifies as being very widespread both now and in the past. 6 regions. No contact with each other. Same solution. The reason this particular punishment required such careful community management is that killing a group member, even a genuinely dangerous one, had its own risk of destroying the group from within. When the entire group participates actively and simultaneously, no one will know who cast the first stone, and this precludes blood revenge by angrily grieving relatives. However, the predominant hunter-gatherer pattern is for the group to delegate a close kinsman of the deviant to kill him, because that too obviates a revenge killing. A grieving relative who did not consent to the killing might seek revenge against whoever carried it out. That revenge could fracture the group. So the community's solution was elegant and brutal in equal measure. Make the execution a collective act, or have the condemned person's own family carry it out, so that no single individual could be identified as the killer. The group decided, the group acted. No one was responsible, everyone was responsible. Who were these punishments used against? The answer is more complex than simply criminals or murderers. Bohm's analysis of the ethnographic record found that the most common target of the most severe prehistoric punishments was not the ordinary transgressor, it was the bully. Specifically, the chronic, unresponsive, socially dangerous individual who refused to respect the group's equality, who accumulated resources, who threatened, who dominated, who would not be corrected. Hunter-gatherers use capital punishment mainly to eliminate bullies. Although this puts the main focus on serial killers and dangerously malicious shamans, they also may kill people who endanger the group cosmologically by breaking major taboos, or individuals who are extremely disruptive socially and seriously endanger cooperation and social harmony. Bohm proposes something remarkable here. He suggests that some of these executed bullies were what we would today recognize as psychopaths, individuals with a genuine neurological incapacity for empathy and remorse. A conservative estimate of male psychopaths in our modern population would be 1%. This would suggest that prehistorically at any given time, perhaps 1 out of every 20 foraging groups of about 25 men, women, and children was likely to face a problem with an adult male psychopath expressing his inborn domineering tendencies. The group gossips, the group ridicules, the group shuns, the group exiles. And when none of it works, when the person simply cannot or will not change, the group acts. This, Bohm argues, may have had an effect not just on individual bands, but on the human genome itself. If the chronic bullies were systematically removed from the breeding population across thousands of generations, across all 6 regions of the world, then the traits associated with extreme dominance-seeking behavior may have been, over time, very slowly selected against. The moral community did not just enforce rules. It may have shaped the biology of the species that enforced them. There is one more thing worth discussing: the role of the supernatural in prehistoric justice. Because in many hunter-gatherer societies, the community's enforcement of rules was not the only force the transgressor feared. The universe itself was watching. Among the Inuit, breaking a taboo was understood to carry consequences that extended beyond the individual. Violation of taboos caused harm not only to the violator, but also to other persons, even the entire settlement. Revealing the taboo violation had a neutralizing effect. If a hunter broke the rules governing how animals should be treated after the kill, the sea might withhold its creatures. If a woman violated the separation rules between land and sea animals, the hunts might fail. The shaman, in this context, was not only a healer or a spiritual intermediary. The shaman was, in effect, the investigator, the one who could divine which taboo had been broken, by whom, and what public confession or ritual was required to restore the balance. Public confession. This is an extraordinary feature of prehistoric justice that we tend to overlook. The confession was not to a priest or a judge. The confession was to everyone. Spoken aloud in front of the community, it accomplished 2 things simultaneously. It acknowledged the norm that had been violated, reinforcing that norm for everyone who witnessed it. And it gave the transgressor a path back into the group. A ritual reintegration that the purely punitive logic of later legal systems often did not offer. In many indigenous traditions studied by anthropologists, this principle of reintegration, the idea that punishment exists not to permanently exclude but to restore, is one of the most consistent features of justice before states existed. The goal was not a prison, the goal was a functioning group. We began with a simple scene: 30 people around a fire. Someone has done something wrong. And now you know what happened. The community watched, the community talked, the community mocked, carefully, deliberately, with purpose. It excluded, it exiled, and in the most extreme cases it acted with a finality that no court of law could match. All of this without a judge, without a law book, without a state. What the anthropological evidence reveals is not a picture of prehistoric chaos where the strongest did as they pleased. It reveals something almost the opposite. A world where the collective, acting with a remarkable consistency across every continent and culture, developed solutions to the problem of human transgression that were in many ways more effective than what came later. The gossip network caught violations before they escalated. The public ridicule corrected behavior before it became dangerous. The ostracism removed the threat without shedding blood. And when all of that failed, the community acted as one, so that responsibility was shared by all and vengeance was invited by none. There were rules before there were laws, there was justice before there were courts, and the enforcers were quite simply everyone. If this made you think differently about where our ideas of right and wrong actually come from, you're not alone. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more of this, the unwritten history of how humans actually worked before the world we know, hit subscribe and make sure you turn on notifications.